on the innovation side, the kinds of innovation that we're seeing, whether it's in batteries and ultracapacitors, in materials and lightweighting of technologies, in simple things like how to make tires more energy efficient. This is one of those where you talk to your children and you say, where do you go? Well, material sciences are pretty fascinating right now because of the kinds of step changes that are going on in each of these areas. I come from a business background, a private sector business background. I have the privilege of working for a Nobel laureate, and so I have learned more about physics and chemistry and material sciences over the last 8 months than I ever thought I would in a professional context. The second one is about infrastructure, and this is where I think we see great opportunities because the United States basically stopped investing in a set of this infrastructure sometime around 1970. And our opportunity, whether it's in the smart grid arena to create the kind of transmission and distribution infrastructure that is actually ready to move into the 21st century, decade late, or whether it's creating the kind of battery charging infrastructure to enable electrification to occur on the field, those kinds of opportunities create significant opportunities for investment, significant opportunities for return, whether it be on the part of municipalities, on the part of utilities, or on the part of startup companies. And who owns that infrastructure is still an as yet undecided question. And then third, there's a whole set of incentive questions here. There are a set of incentives about the federal government. Do we put a price on carbon? And so we actually get a real transparent approach to doing that. What do we do with reliability standards? What do we do with warranties? How do we manage through a set of those choices? There's a whole set of things about utility rate making and how the push and pull of batteries actually get integrated into the utility grid and how that gets priced. And these are all very important questions in terms of creating a marketplace that can persist over an extended period of time. Because again, as we make a down payment, if you just try to muscle it through, if we just try to do it by throwing federal dollars at it, that actually won't solve the problem unless we create the right kind of long-term incentive structures that allows the market to take place from there. So as we look at it, the government clearly has a role, but our role is that of making a down payment and creating a level playing field in which the market can then select appropriate technologies and can make long-term investments that lead these kind of markets to develop over time. Near term, we're going to be judged on job creation and our contribution to the economic recovery. Every month we're looking at it. Every quarter we get a set of data. And we are watching this very, very closely because we have to get this economy moving again. We have to see the kind of job creation. But it's not just about getting jobs. It's about getting good jobs. Jobs where our intent is to get people jobs in industries where we have the ability to be competitive on a global basis over the long term. Those kind of jobs last as opposed to the kind of jobs that somehow I pay you today and to work and then once I stop paying you don't actually have a job after that. So we're trying to create industries. We're trying to create people who have the kind of capabilities for jobs for the long term. But in 10 years, we're going to be judged on whether we've actually made a meaningful difference in the nation's energy and environmental future. And it's really about four things. It's about cleaner communities. If we have batteries and transportation electrification, our communities are cleaner. It's not just about CO2. It's about particulates and NOx and SOx emissions. And by improving both the quality of the generation fleet and the quality of the transportation fleet together, we have the ability to change the healthy character of our communities. It's about national security. We have to reduce our dependence on imported oil, and in order to do that, we have to improve the fossil fuel productivity of our industrial sectors and our transportation sector, and electrification clearly is a more efficient approach to powering a transportation sector. And so how do we capture those kind of opportunities? Because from a national security standpoint, we can't afford not to do that. It is about economic growth. It's not just about growth today. It's about creating jobs for the long term. It's about creating industries that are growing on a rapid basis and establishing the United States leadership on a global basis. And it really is coming back to this notion of the United States as a technology and innovation leader. It's something that's deeply important to the Secretary as he thinks about his legacy. How do we establish the United States as the center and cradle of innovation on a global basis against a set of the next generation technologies ahead? This will be a journey. If you take a look at the energy and environmental goals overall, the Center for American Progress estimates that this will cost $150 to $200 billion a year in investment over the next 20 years to achieve our goals. In this context, the Recovery Act, $100 billion of projects, $36.7 billion of government funding, is a down payment. It's a down payment both in terms of getting industry started, and it's also an opportunity to demonstrate that these are high payout projects that the market should take on an ongoing basis. The Recovery Act is clearly bringing private capital in off the sidelines. If the government does its part and makes a set of investments, private capital is clearly flowing into those opportunities. We took a look at A123, which was one of the big recipients of the batteries awards for $239 million, who then has the opportunity to go public a few weeks later for another $400 million. And it's that to and fro. The government does its part, the private sector does its part. The vast majority of funds for A123 are not federal dollars, they're private sector dollars, but they are able to move forward in part because the government will play its role appropriately. We are not able to fund all the positive NPV projects that we see. One of the great opportunities is to stand in the flow and see these great projects going by. One of the sad parts is realizing we can't fund all of them, and yet we realize that many of those projects should go on anyway, whether or not the government funds us. So one of the things we're trying to do is to make decisions quickly so that the private market can then go on and make those investments as they go forward. And over the long term, the private markets have to carry the load. The Secretary of Energy frames this as the next industrial revolution, and I think he's right in doing that. Today we're aligning the energy and environmental policies in the United States and delivering the resources that are required to achieve those goals in ways that we haven't for several decades. And if we can deliver the kind of innovation, productivity improvements, and capital formation that drove the last industrial revolution, we have the ability to achieve our energy and environmental goals quite quickly and at very low cost as we go forward. And we have the opportunity to reestablish the United States as a global leader in science and technology, particularly around energy and the environment. So with that, I'll be happy to take your questions, and I appreciate your time very much.